Okay, we are back. We have our friend back with us after the initial experience that we had. I was about 5 minutes in to this presentation, and we had an individual who's an experiencer with ET and UFO activity in their lives, we've come to find out, and I put up a slide of the CIA's involvement in UFO activity back in the 50s and 60s, and this was a trigger. It was her seizure, she feels like, was a direct response to that, saying that it basically looked exactly like one of the craft that she has experienced landing right in front of her. And we documented that with the police and everybody coming here. And so I just would like to say, to keep things in context, which is actually what this initial thing where I'm going to begin, because without fully understanding this, the rest of this presentation is kind of going in one ear and out the other, in the sense that this is very important, because this is how they classify documents in the defense and intelligence community. And this is very well known in the upper echelons. And what this really truly means is that when we look at a document, regardless of the era, we may just take it at face value, and from there we don't understand the actual message that is trying to be conveyed in that document, in which it may be multi-leveled, and there's different keys in order to unlock these. Sometimes these documents are color-coded. At other times it's the wordplay and stuff, as I'll get into here, but it's just interesting where we are now. And this is not an offering of fear towards any of the subject matter here, because what the whole premise of this conference is that we do have the ability to overcome these things. And we have illustrated that here today, and that our friend is back here with us. We have seen a great deal, many people become healed in the sense of being alleviated of the different symptoms, and this is a work in progress, like it is from coming back in anything. In every case is unique, but the bottom line is that we do see a tangible quantum experience that has alleviation of symptoms and many other things that are effectual in the environment. And so that's really where this unraveling of this compartmentalization is going to lead. And I'm just going to dive back into this document where we were. And this says the use of analogous imagery and semantics has been used throughout the closely related communities of defense, intelligence, and academia for decades. There are several contexts from which to draw. This means that documents and or files have several contexts incorporated into the same work body. And this, to kind of back up, this is actually written in that context, and so that's why it's worded in this way in some ways. And we go on to say that this is a cryptological system intended to prevent unintended personnel from ascertaining the contents. In order to retrieve and understand the meaning of these different methods of security classification, one must have a repertoire that contains a broad spectrum of perspectives from which to derive the contextual message. To fully equate the information, one must have an understanding of art, math, history, and science, as well as a comprehensive knowledge of languages. And in the uppermost echelons, there are inside jokes amongst the different agents and operatives that use this type of stuff. And this is intended as a key to unlock the secrets that are written into these works. And only in the works of highest order are the intended recipients acknowledged within. And I would just like to go ahead and restate, as I did in the previous segment, that this work here is for everyone, and it's very important that we begin to embrace and understand that our history has been altered. We have had these things going on in which the general public has been steered in a direction in which has been deceptive for periods of decades. And so this really, censored ideas, counterfeit answers, is something that I would say about that. It's a quote from a song, but it makes a lot of sense, particularly in this type of thinking when we're talking about the changing of history. And with that, we pop in here, and this is an example of artificial intelligence essentially speaking to us. And this is how long it's been an influence on this planet. This is from the Open Archives. This is another example of how they will incorporate the analogous imagery and semantics right into the title with the AI. Okay, that's exactly what you're looking at here. And this kind of theme is followed throughout. You do have color codings in these as well. That's a lot to get into, but the bottom line is this is an example of URLs for human interaction for a machine-based system. The OAI is meant to be a machine-based language for parsing content. These examples are provided for informational purposes only. And this, as we'll see, has been online since way before anybody had any idea that anything was online at all. This is the January 1st of 1960. This is the first accession number that we have here, beginning with the number 42. This document itself, I forget the subject matter. I do know that it's dated to 1952, and anybody can go and look this up. And so what that in and of itself right there shows is that we have a document from 1950 with this accession number. It goes right, it's been online for over 55 years. Okay, understanding that is very important to equate this into our worldview in the technological sense, to understand all the things that have come to pass and that we have been overcoming out here as we've been, basically shutting this thing down. And so you had the launch of Sputnik. We went into that. This is a meeting of these different types of artificial intelligence here on Earth, and even into the aquatic aspect of it here with this helmet and the robot intelligence. We do see testimony reflecting undersea bases, particularly in the onset of the Majestic material that came from William Cooper back to 1972, and the other stuff that's come out, which we'll see later in the presentation. This kind of gets into the internet timeline with the launch of Sputnik. It's the first artificial satellite. In response, the U.S. forms Advanced Research Projects Agency, or ARPA, the following year within the Department of Defense to establish a U.S. lead in science and technology applicable to the military. And so we get into the communication nets. We do see more of this way of thinking with the handshake that we just saw back there, online man-computer communication. These things are written throughout in this historical context, in this way of thinking throughout this entire presentation, and they all follow suit, and it becomes very evident. And so this is a method of the security classification that's really something that becomes startlingly clear when we're talking about something like a galactic network, okay, that we're going to get into here. And so this is the document, the members and affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network, that is dated from April 25th, 1965. To put that into context, of course, this is before Kennedy was killed in November of that same year. I'm sorry, that's 1963 up there, not 5. You can see a sense of pressing urgency incorporated into this document entitled Members and Affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. And it says, first, I apologize humbly for having to postpone the meeting, which essentially is what just happened here. Scheduled for 5 May 1965 in Palo Alto. It goes on to talk about he has been assigned a new task that must begin and be activated immediately, and he must devote all his time to the coming in the coming week to that. And down here it talks about his perception of these events, and that's very interesting when we lead into the rest of the thing. So to understand the pressing urgency of this memo, this is the memo right here. There's an intergalactic computer network that everybody's basically hooked up to that has an off-planet signal that has come here onto this planet Earth. Okay, this is known in the upper echelons of the defense and intelligence community, I can assure you, because I've been involved in it. And so that's pretty heavy stuff, but the bottom line is we get into this 5 months later, and if we'll remember the movie, I think it's National Treasure, it says, hey honey, do you want to know who killed JFK? And he pulls that thing out of the president's office, and it's a little microfiche thing. And it'll get right into this. We do have the operational potential of subliminal perception. This is from the Central Intelligence Agency up there that we can see. It was declassified from secret in 1994. And this is, again, is the operational potential of subliminal perception. And it says, perception is demonstrated to have occurred below the threshold of conscious sensory experience when a person responds to a stimulus too weak in intensity or too short in duration for him to be aware of it. We kind of had an example of something like that here today. And it goes on to talk about different examples here. I think it would say individual behavior without awareness of the stimulus, of which subliminal perception is a subtype, has been a subject of study in psychological laboratories for at least 70 years. Okay? And a great deal of technical data has been collected on the subject. Recently, it has been associated with some theories of depth analysis and popularized for possible commercial exploitation by the advertising world. Anybody who has been in advertising or movies and so on will tell you that this is a major part of it with the subliminal messages and so on. There are innumerable examples of that for anybody to look up with just a little bit of research. And so we're going to get in here with the former CIA director. And Operation Mockingbird came out in '74. We do see that the congressional hearings, it's admitted that the CIA is influencing foreign media in order to have an outcome in our media here, because remember the CIA is supposed to operate outside of the borders of the United States. And what does he say? He says, We'll know our disinformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Okay, they have been on this as a matter of acute targeting with specificity, with such, I mean, you almost want to say magnificence. It's unbelievable what these guys have gotten away with. You have to give them a sense of credit, recognize your enemy at that point. Personally, is how I feel about this, because we get into stuff like this. This is the development of weaponry for psychological warfare. You can see that this is from 1963. It came from confidential, it came down to unclassified. It gets into many different things. Again, you can see the header there. That's the development of weapons for psychological warfare. You have the accession numbers and so on. Distribution is unlimited of this. And anybody, last I checked, they had scrubbed this. It is backed up. You can't find it. And it just kind of gets into the different technicalities of kind of just the document itself. I'll let you guys read that later on. And it was from confidential, and it gets into like the photic flicker rate, which is something that they'll use in conjunction with the operation of potential or subliminal perception, the operational potential for that, because it hypnotizes people literally. And we're dealing with this on television on a massive basis and to the tune of hundreds of millions of people just in this United States alone. And it talks about the different electrophysiological aspects of mind control and other types of sensory deprivation in this document. It's in a lot of good detail, and it's very interesting. And this kind of carries us through the timeline. And I had a video there, Bobby. Did we not see that video? Let's go back, because I think that we need to find that. I think that it comes in. Let's go ahead and pop that in right here, because what we have is, I'm just going to take it back a little bit, because we have the operational potential of subliminal perception. We get into saying that this is supposed to be false, and then we see this coming to fruit in the public. And let's go ahead and roll that video, that little clip.
Which one exactly?
The one that you cut. This one, Bobby. And it says in National Treasure, "Hey honey, do you want to know who killed JFK?" This was the beginning of a new era of mind control. And what you're going to see is you're going to see her lean into him, shoot him, throw the gun behind his back, crawl out in what is called misdirection on the back of that trunk. And this is a textbook example. Now, regardless of all the other things that we have heard about this case, okay? Regardless of any of those things that we have heard, it's all been a lie, just like we saw up here. Well, it's going to be complete when they feel like everything that they believe is a lie. And it's very plain to see that regardless of any other shooters that may have been involved in this case, she clearly, if you'll run that one more time, shoots him. She leans into him. The blood wounds are consistent with that. And she shoots him. She throws the gun behind his back and crawls out of the truck. Now, I can tell you, when I realized this, I about had a seizure myself, because it's amazing, it's profound, and it changes everything, because you realize the depth of the mind control that has been going on since this time, which is, we're looking at, 52 years. And so this is something that goes way back, and it's been that heavily controlled. This is the Zapruder footage on a loop, okay? Well, that was, they misdirect everybody from the car the whole time. And that's the operational potential of subliminal perception. And this is something that they know has gone on. And so that's where this brings us to this. And, it's self-explanatory. So I'm going to skip back up here. And again, we look at this and it's just like, oh, really? And so obviously there's a UFO aspect. Obviously there's something building with these ETs. Of course, we've heard this about JFK, that he was going to release some of this information and so on. I would agree with that statement very much. And this is where we get into the cybernetics and the coupling of man-machine on our timeline. And this is in 1966, okay, February 17th. And this is the introduction to cybernetics. It contains a collected and unified material necessary for the presentation of such branches of modern cybernetics as the theory of electronic digital computers, theory of discrete automata, theory of discrete self-organizing systems, etc. It gets into the image recognition and the automation of thought processes. Okay, this is 1966. It goes on to talk about this a little bit more with the cybernetics and so on. And this will give you the definition of cybernetics: the science of communications and automatic control systems in both machines and living things. Okay, the science of communication and control theory that is concerned especially with the comparative study of automatic control systems and the central nervous system and brain and mechanical electrical communication systems. Okay, so when we look at the morgues, we look at the way that all this stuff comes into our bodies and all of these different aspects in which we'll get into further in this presentation, we see that as far back as 1966, this was a stated agenda from our Defense Department, and it's the integrating of man with machine, and it all is coming from a time which we had just gone into outer space, and that's very interesting. The purpose, this is into the Monarch Project here, and the purpose of this Monarch Project that went to become the Phoenix Project was pretty simple in the sense that they were trying to create the following. It says the U.S. Department of Defense's original plan to research the mind control phenomena was to determine psychological and chemical formulas providing the U.S. with the perfect espionage agent. This quickly evolved into planning the production of the perfect soldier, government, worker, slave. However, German SS officer, occultist, Himmler's research development scientist, sent this search for the Manchurian candidate off in another direction. Psychological genetic engineering. It was determined that absolute mind control could be realized through specific tortures of the intended transgenerational victim from the moment of birth. Armed with this deadly research, a collection of dedicated psychiatrists from Germany, in quotes there, in Italy and the U.S., of course this is Project Paperclip that we're talking about here, and we get into it's an ancient form of this stuff, and it's being reborn, essentially, the monarch. The monarch science had simply unraveled the occult, cryptic, so-called magical secrets of mind control to spawn a new generation of superior beings who could never ask what their country could do for them, but only what they could do for their country. History. Project Monarch is the U.S. Defense Department codename assigned to the subsection of the Central Intelligence Agency's Operation Artichoke, later to become Project MK Ultra, whereas Project Monarch was officially dedicated sometime in the early 1960s by the U.S. Army. Project Monarch is a genealogical approach to define transgenerational via genetic psychology, behavioral modification through trauma-based psychological mind control. Okay? There are innumerable examples of this coming out. I would certainly say that Kathy O'Brien would be an example of this. We've seen Roseanne Barr come out about this. We've seen Corey Haim and the other guys come out about this stuff in the media and in the higher levels. Many examples of this going on. It's become completely evident in our culture today. And this really gets into the background of, what the Monarch was all about, the top secret, the Project Paperclip, keeping it in. And really we get into there's an emphasis down here at the bottom, which is important, to microbiology and pharmacology. And we see this start to take root back at this time. There's obviously an element of pedophilia and the Nazis in this, and it goes on into this, and it's very interesting that we do see that they did have an interest in the psychiatry, psychological warfare, but also the microbiology and pharmacology. We get into the stuff with Merck and so on. This is who's running that. They're at the helm of this deal. And although Project Monarch's information has to date not been declassified, as was its result, as its research umbrella from DoD mind control studies known as Project MK Ultra, it nevertheless has become a household word among the multitude of intelligence community operatives. And this is true. I can assure you of that as one of these myself. And so Project MK Ultra was exposed publicly in 1970. This is a matter of public record. Anybody can look that up. And through the lawsuits filed by these Canadian survivors, they won money off this in order to settle out of court. They settled it out of court, but regardless, the secret of this had basically come out into the media. And obviously, this type of technology, and that's how you want to think it with the mind control, is so effective that we are largely confronted with the public that can look at this type of stuff, see that they were doing it, and still choose to ignore it, that it hasn't been going on. And that is part of this normalcy bias, the alters, and all this other. And so it's very difficult to weed through that sometimes with our counterparts, our friends, and our family. And I'd say largely people are waking up, but what do we have here? This is Operation Majority. This came to us from a friend of my partner, Kimberly Schultz, and we will see this on the internet in various forms. I have never seen it in this original copy form anywhere else. This is the exclusive version of that as far as I know. And Operation Majority was the operation in which oversaw all information, disinformation, and so on And essentially what this document is an indictment against the federal government for them making a pact with ETs. Okay, that's exactly what this is. And they get into it in detail. He was a cleared Navy officer who, in his own testimony, as we can see reflected up here, there will be no corrections to this file. Okay? Several years later, he goes on to completely disavow this testimony and say that it wasn't true. And through my own research, I would say that this definitely leads to the fact that he was cloned and or mind controlled into doing that. And when we look at that kind of stuff, it really becomes heavy. But this is the source of the majestic stuff and where it all gets into the MJ12. And there is disinformation in this for the times now to be deciphered and to be brought back out. And so that's kind of part of what we're doing here. You do see the different clearance levels here of the security organizational chart, which has to do with the majestic. Okay, you have majestic up here at the top. You have restricted down here. You have your president right here. Okay, you have the 12 here. You have the different, cosmic and majestic up here, Luna and all these other ultras, which get into different things as far as ETs and stuff are concerned. There's different dimensional beings. These are assigned to those different groups. And a lot of people say, well, this is just something you get off the internet. What we do see here is that we have a NATO security briefing from the Navy itself, and it does talk about cosmic, and we do see majestic right above cosmic. Most people don't even realize that cosmic is an authentic security classification. NATO has 4 levels of classified information: cosmic, top secret, NATO, and so on. Cosmic is a topic of much debate, and it is something that is legitimate, as we can see here. And moving on into that, this is the actual document itself. It is shown there in that URL, and it talks about the different restrictions. The security classification is applied to information, the unauthorized disclosure of which could cause exceptionally grave damage to NATO. The marking cosmic is applied to top secret material to signify that it is property of NATO. The term NATO top secret is not used, and so that does give the sense of validity to the former charge and so on. And that moves us into the Montauk Project, because it's very pertinent to the rest of the things that we're going to lead into with the global communications infrastructure, essentially being outfitted with this type of technology that we're going to see here that follows, that has to do with Monarch Phoenix Project and so on with Montauk. And it comes from up on Long Island and Montauk Point initially. And it's very interesting that we have people in our immediate circle that seem to have a connection with this today. I'd like to point that back out because it seems like we're all really kind of coming back together for this project. It's a very special time to be in this. And so, with the cancellation of the Phoenix Project, which happens to be where we're standing now, the people involved were on the horns of a dilemma. They had spent the better part of almost 20 years developing mind control and stealth technologies that Congress didn't want anyone to use. Undeterred, the scientists went to the one organization they knew would want to engage in further research and development of the devices the Phoenix Project had produced, the military. Naturally, the military was very excited about the idea of a weapon system that would allow them to defeat an enemy without ever firing a shot. And I'd just like to pause right there and we think back to Desert Storm and the complete media charade that it was. Okay? We go in there and we see these guys giving up in droves. Okay? We saw them throw their weapons down and freak out, and they were using this type of technology. And we know that there's many different people who have come out on record. I think that is a very good example. They use this on the public today, and it's something that has continued to go on. And they agreed to continue the project, setting up the Phoenix people in a secluded area where proper experimentation could be conducted. The military also agreed to provide the equipment and personnel the project required in order to operate. Okay, this is the Montauk Air Force Base, which has been meticulously documented and recorded in so much videographic proof of the information itself. There is definitely something going on here. Anybody can look into it for themselves. It's very interesting. It's played a role in my own life personally, in that my first memory is that of being in a Montauk setting and basically crying my eyes out at the age of 3. It was a scary experience to be subjected to your own future, as these chairs are capable of doing. And so I'll get into this, and it's all relevant about the use of resonant frequency expenditure and consciousness in order to have an effectual relationship in the environment that becomes manifest. And that is what they found out. Going back to the beginning of the presentation, we saw all these world's leading scientists sitting there, Heisenberg and Bohr and Einstein and so on. They realized that we can have an effectual relationship on the micro scale. And so these projects have become to amplify that. They're all very black and classified. And so the Montauk Air Force Base was reopened in late 1971, and although it was still listed as a decommissioned base by the military, allowing Phoenix 2 to get underway. Along with many of the original Phoenix Project scientists, there were members of the military, government workers, and civilian personnel brought in from various corporations. This is very important. You hear the accounts of this, and there's also a ET involvement in this with the different draconian races and so on, Greys and such. And so that's important to note. A number of the military servicemen present were Air Force radar technicians who had worked with the SAGE radar systems all through the 60s. They reported that the general mood of the base had changed according to the frequency and pulse duration of the radar system. This seemingly trivial piece of information was considered very important to the Phoenix people, who quickly determined the changing rate and width of the radar pulse. They could superficially alter the way people thought and felt. Okay? This is very fundamental to everything that's coming up. We do get in also to the Cameron aspect. We do have a Cameron here by marriage, interestingly. And these test subjects were placed inside of a small room on the base at the SAGE radar system, where that energy was focused on that room, bathing it in massive amounts of micro and radio waves. By altering the frequency and pulse of the radar set, they could make a person laugh, cry, angry, sleepy, and so on. And it really gets into much more than this with the non-burning radiation, as Candy was describing to us earlier. There's many different types of this. But in 1973, the experimental process had reached a new step. The scientists wanted to experiment with large groups of people, changing their thoughts and moods en masse and monitoring the results. Units of the U.S. Army were invited to the base, units rather, were invited to the base for R&R, becoming the unwitting targets of mood-altering experiments. And it goes on to the kidnapping of children, bringing them into these devices, and subjecting them to an array of different experiments that really is beyond the scope of this conversation, just for the time that we have allotted. And this is a picture of the Montauk chair itself. It's actually a pretty good representation from my own personal experience, although mine did not have the back in the sense it was more laid down. The back, it was almost completely vertical, and I was very, very young, and it was an underground setting, and I remember it very distinctly. And this takes us to this point. Of course, what we have at the Montauk Project is the interpretation of the brainwave signals by a computer that are then broadcasted back out into the environment. This is what they did. The chair itself will pick up on the thoughts of a psychic in the chair and then amplify them after being, the computer recapitulates the signal after, and then they broadcast it out. And when they subject an individual in the chair to different types of brainwashing and maybe something that's negative, the power of suggestion is so powerful that when they amplify this, they can have a profoundly negative manifestive result in the environment, or the flip side of that coin. And so there's different applications with this, but it's certainly something that you don't want the wrong people having their hands on. And today we see this incorporated into the complete infrastructure of the communications network here on this planet. And these systems are already in place. You know, we do have the crowdsource brainwave control. And so this is a big deal. You do have the signal processing that goes on. They have the EEG type technology, which we'll come to see, that reads the brainwaves through the cloud and our devices in order to monitor them and exploit this brainwave functioning pattern, which does have a manifestive result in the environment. And this, Bobby, if you can let that play, we're going to learn here about the collapse of the wave function. It's just a little video, and it's important to understand this concept before we move further. And so we'll just kind of let that play. Get that volume up.
And that our senses are playing tricks on us. You just gotta wonder, what is this reality that we find ourselves in? Quantum physics says it's all just waves of information. Do I believe that? I hope so. Yikes! And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness. The infamous double slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. If we randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen, we see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the bottom of another wave, they cancel each other out. So now, there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and where they cancel, there is nothing. So, when we throw things, that is, matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands. What? An interference pattern. We fired electrons, tiny bits of matter through. But we get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought, maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So, they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they can interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched.
Now we can go ahead.
It was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange netherworld of quantum events.
Okay, if we missed the point of that, obviously this is trying to be made simple. It is complicated subject matter, but it's actually quite simple. Essentially what they're saying is that the act of observation collapses a wave potentiality, which makes a situation, an event, or a object even, in some cases with acute ability applied to this, become physical. Okay? And this is the basic of what quantum physics and theory has always been about. And this is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. This is not some new age mumbo jumbo. This is coming from the best minds on earth. And you look up and see who Heisenberg is. And so this is very interesting that they know this, and this is directly relevant to the technology which has been used since this time. And this is we see that this is, all the way back to 1930. So this is actually the first picture released this year of light behaving as both a particle and a wave. And it's a really cool picture. Anybody can do a little bit of research on that as well. And this is interesting because we see the active observation shifting there to illustrate it as both matter and a wave. And so the implications of this idea on our physical reality are profound, and there's so many different potentialities. That's what's so interesting. We have what's called Eigen States that are propagated as wave form. And this is wave potential. And so what we know is that when we observe waves, we have a change in the physical environment that is expressed tangibly for us in many different ways. And so when we have an artificial intelligence, which we've seen, they're propagating, this AI is propagating the wavelengths from the towers and the smart grid, etc., and then the collapse of the quantum wave function inherent to human observation is then playing out the potentiality of an artificial nature. And this is like the ultimate coupling of man and machine. And this is the stated agenda with the cybernetics and so on. And so it's pretty simple when we begin to understand the Emoto experiments or placebo experiments, in which there are innumerable studies in which we see things changing in our physical environment based on our intention and things that we have in it. But when we have an artificial stimulus in the environment that is seeding the environment with artificial waveform, and we have the collapse of the quantum wave function inherent to our own observation, at that point, we have participated in the generation of artificial timelines in a real sense, because these things are coming out there, and it's our perception that makes timelines what they are. I mean, this is the basis of general and special relativity, in that time is constrained by the velocity of c, which is 186,000 miles a second, and mass also distorts space-time, and thoughts, therefore also having mass, will distort space-time. And so when they can seed you essentially with fake thoughts, it's having a manifestive result in the environment. And this brings us to a set of documents which this is classified, had been classified by a particular band of satanic professors, intelligence officials, and individuals throughout the defense and intelligence community, as well as academia and many different universities. And again, we see that at the beginning, all the way back to 1930, they chose to classify this information within academia and to put a new type of teaching in effect. We saw that at the beginning of the presentation here. This says modeling in an artificial universe at the top. This is one of the color-coded documents. This is from DARPA back in 1997, as you see down here. Not so long ago, electronic systems were literal expressions of the electromechanics within. What does that mean? I'm going to tell you. That means before, transhumanism had been something that had already happened. This is a historical context in which we draw, and they knew that they were essentially reactivating this system, and they did it intentionally when they did it. And this gets back into the Tower of Babel and all these different things, which are a complete part of this PowerPoint demonstration that they put together. I initially, BCI'd this off the internet. This is the system called Towers of Abstraction, in which we see Montauk type technology refined and incorporated into the global communications infrastructure and used with artificial intelligence to control not only human thought processes and emotion, but to literally steal the creative ability to have a negative manifestation. And that is something that is very difficult to wrap the mind around, I think, initially for some people. And it's a lot to look at, but it tells you what these guys are doing, and we see this going on around us, and so we'll get into that more. But today, layers of abstraction hide electromechanics, which were within, taken into context. Not so long ago, electronic systems were literal expressions of electromechanics within. Today, they hide it, and they design with metaphors. Effective management of complexity will depend on choosing the right mix of metaphors. And that gets into the cloud interface, and we know what they have that's hooked up to, even CERN has what's called an Eigen mode generator. And what that means is is it's generating waveform that can be perceived by the human organism that is artificial, and it's a wave potentiality that makes physical situations able to be something that we can experience. And so this is really virtual reality on a level that is so complicated. It literally is the Matrix at this point. And what is the cloud? You know, we have the swarm at the edge of the cloud. All this stuff is stemming from Berkeley. UC Berkeley, which we can trace many of the things with Morgellons back to there. The Genome Research Lab had the audacity to basically engrave their initials with nanolithography into these different, the Morgellons artifacts, the different crystalline structures and so on. And we see that they have signed their name on this work, as well as NASA. And the swarm at the edge of the cloud is the integration of man and machine. It's transhumanism. And this is from their documents. The swarm gives the cloud ears, eyes, hands, and feet, enabling services that are directly embedded in the physical world rather than just in the cyber world. Making the platform open and universal will unleash millions of swarm devices and swarmlet developers, just as smartphone platforms open the door to millions of app developers. And this is really an element of compartmentalization that has been very prominent in order to allow this NSA spying that has just gotten shut down. To put this conference in context, we have just had the NSA lapse in spying. The USA Freedom Act was then signed after that. There's a lot of conjecture about if this is good or bad. The bottom line is it really all has to do with this system and it being shut off, that we can trace it back to 1996. And the cloud. What is the cloud? This is an artificial intelligence-based data center for IBM. This is, data centers. The cloud is a place on Earth, and it talks about the development of these different things and gets into it. And this is the advancements made in artificial intelligence with IBM is something that is not really a matter of conjecture. They've had this for a long time, and we do see that. And what do we have here? We have a refined Montauk device. We saw how the stuff works. We have all the documents. And what they're doing at this school, this is the largest elementary school in the Dallas Independent School District, in which it has a largely minority student body. It's predominantly Hispanic. And I have been out there. I have passed out flyers to these kids, the crossing guard, the teachers, the cops, the feds. I have talked to you about this. You name the frickin' agency, NSA, FBI, CIA, Director of National Intelligence, Presidents, all kinds of crap. I've been in these people's face with this. And what are we looking at? They indoctrinate children inside this place the same way they did at Montauk. It's the same thing. This school is called Anne Frank. Now, if anybody knows what Anne Frank is, the story, it's just unsurreal. This type of propaganda makes the leaflets that were dropped in the ghetto look like frickin' Christmas cards compared to what is really going on. And what they're just notice the location of this, in which this is not, unfortunately, a fluke. We see the placement of these devices, which are Class B carcinogen. There is literally a radio frequency exposure warning sign on the other side of that on the basketball court. You can see the basketball goal there, right around there on that tower. There's a sign that says you should not be here. Radio frequency exposure warning sign. And my response is, mind control is dismissed due to its effectiveness. That means that this stuff works so good that when you look at it in the face, a cop will write you a ticket out in the parking lot, but he doesn't care that there's a federal law violation going on in the frickin' park on the playground. Okay, with these children running out underneath it. So this is something that is massive and major. It's a refined Nazi type of technology. And how do they like to hide it? They like to hide it in plain view. We do see the incorporation of this is a highly subjective subliminal environment. Okay, and they use the kids this way in order to have the manifestive result that they tune them to. And beyond any of that, the neural pathways of children are at this developmental age. We know that DNA is a fractal antenna in an electromagnetic field, and so does the FCC and other organizations. And this means many different things. It's expressed on many different levels. But the bottom line is we know that the neural pathways are being reworked in children to a specific form of pathway routing in the human body due to this magnetic thing. And another part of this is the electroporation, in which they essentially electrify the air in order to deliver DNA and pharmaceuticals into the human cell. And so I don't have a slide for that here, but it is a part of that. And so we get into the cloud system. This is back to the complex systems that comes out of Berkeley. And this is the analogous imagery and semantics. You have timing, structure, control laws, logic. You have different images. These are the Eigen States that are represented from the Eigenmode generator. And this is wave potentiality of an artificial nature that is coming from the cloud. This is how this document is classified, and this is exactly what's gone on. And it is right at the cutting edge of not only physics, but quantum physics, and even plasma theory is incorporated into this in the sense that when the melding of this happens with the collapse of the quantum wave function, it does bring something physical into existence. And that is what the whole Montauk Project and all these other things, of course, have been about. And so when we look at these documents, it really makes us want to know if we research any of these projects, this is what they're doing. We get into the different ways that time is affected, and you have the system, and everybody is plugged into this cloud through the interfacing of the EEG type technology in the devices themselves. And so I can provide the solicitations from DARPA and such from this. And so it just shows the different interactions. And this is something that is of such magnitude at a level of classification. It's very difficult. You have the different shapes there. You know, I don't know what you guys want to call that. Maybe it's the flying fruit. That almost looks like a turtle to me upside down. This looks almost like that'll fit in there. Do you see how that fits? And this is the way that people think. Okay, it's the collapse of the quantum wave function from an artificial stimulus to make something happen. Okay, shift in perspective can reduce the complexity of an image, and this is all about the focus and everything. And you want to talk about, you know, thinking outside the box. You have this framework is an explicit representation that enforces constraints on variable interrelationships. Okay? Put this into context for yourself. It's a little difficult if we don't have a math or these other ways of thinking, but a simple way to think about this is that light is constrained by velocity of c. You have waves coming in, and they only generate the ones that they want you to think about. And then you begin to think about them, and the shit becomes real. Okay? It's crazy. And so we do see satanic reference here. We do see, you know, Nimrod. This is the Tower of Babel. This is the beginning opening from Edward Lee. We can tie him in. I'm just going to tell you, after I pulled this document, it implicated them in child trafficking. It implicated them in many other things. We went public with this. Different agencies were notified and so on. We had over 1,000 arrests in Operation Archimedes within a very short amount of time after this information became made available to the proper authorities. And it's nice to see them act on that, although it has still been frustrating to see this system fight us every tooth and nail all of the way. I mean, that's what we've been dealing with. And if you don't know your history, which is part of this analogous imagery and semantics and being able to decipher this document, Nimrod was he established the kingdom of Babylon. He was the great-grandson of Noah, and he built the Tower of Babel, in which God said, no, you can't get this close to me, whether you're using it for the wrong reasons, whatever. Cast us down, made us speak different languages, and we're coming back from this today now, in my opinion. And I think that's very interesting in that he is essentially the granddaddy of the sons of disobedience from a scriptural context, and he's considered to be a very evil person in the Bible. And certainly he is kind of a hallmark of satanic worship. And so then we get into what Babel is today in the computer-related terms in the context of which we're talking about. It's a glossary of computer-oriented abbreviations and acronyms that you can really trace back quite far. It is interesting, the 1996 year, we do trace a lot of things back to that date. But the different acronyms, whether for military, for programming, and so on, is called Babel. And it is a writing language that interacts with human consciousness. This gets us into the Nimrod routing architecture, which is literally what they call it. This is from 1996 also. And we do have the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that does mandate a set of criteria, all of which had to be met directly following the attacks of September 11th and 2001. And so that's another hallmark of this different quantum access and things technology. And we have the proof right here of the satanic involvement even more besides the imagery that we've already seen. We have Professor Edward Lee, and you know, these guys are well versed in their history, I can assure you. And you've got to wonder why a group that is noted here, this is a return path email log from very reputable professors and senior members of the defense and intelligence community. This is very important. This is not just a regular return path email. This is something that I BCI'd off the internet that they did not want anyone to see, and we have made it public for everyone to see, and nobody, I don't care who you are, hasn't come with this. shadow.darpa.mil. And we are literally talking about the shadow government at this point and their insidious satanic involvement with child trafficking and so on, which arrests have already been made. And you see the beginning of this system. Begin 666 Complex Systems Prop 1. Then this encryption begins, and you have all these different things. And this actually was generated out of a place called Corey Hall. Okay, very important for what's to come, because what happens? Okay, we get into the use of the Manitz network, which is a mobile ad hoc network. It's the use of different frequency, and it's a trunking radio. The most important thing about this, you do see the color coding, and this is the Manitz. You do see the power of consciousness being equated into an official government document for use with resonant frequency expenditure, which is exactly what we're talking about here. And so I hope that makes sense, in that investigate importance of power expended on routing in these mobile ad hoc networks. The focus of this task is to look at the benefits of power consciousness in making routing decisions at the network layer. Now, it's so blatantly in your face, it's difficult to follow if you don't speak these languages, but it gets on into the basic foundation of what the internet is all about. We go back to 1960, we saw the off-planet signal come in. We have the internet is already online, January 1st, 1960. What does the internet really mean? Does it have any scriptural mirroring? Has this been written about? Is there anything going on here that we can draw from the past, which may be able to give us insight into our current situation now? You do have the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which certainly is something that John of Patmos knew when he was writing the book of Revelation. It was a common dialect that he would have known in his area, as well as Greek, and that's just the history of it for you. Va, or the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, in fact is W, and so therefore WWW has a numeric value of 666. This is not conjecture, this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is something that's going on. Of course, it's fundamental to the ARPANET and all the things that are a direct result from this off-planet contact that came onto this Earth. Okay, very interesting. Where are we going with this? We do see the 666 also noted down here, not only in the documents of, reputable professors and senior defense officials involved in child trafficking. You see it in the Bible. We talk about the beast, and it talks about the image of the beast, which is a holographic manifestation, which I'm trying to relate through the use of the pineal function located in the forehead, and into our reality and using this. And so, you have the name, the number, and the image of the beast. Let no man might buy or sell say that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. And it talks about the image up here. So you have the name, the number, and the image of the beast in Revelation. And this takes us to pineal functioning. It says that there's a projector in your head. If we've ever had a lucid dream, if we've ever had a real experience where we're flying or any of these things, a real simple way to think about that is we're in another dimension. You can certainly express it in those terms. It's something that is tangible for us. We can feel it. We have emotion. We can wake up in a variety of these different states. This is the essence of pineal function. You do have DMT in there. It's piezochromic. It's piezoelectric, as are many of the different things associated with Morgellons. And what we see is a mimicking of the natural inherent human ability by artificial intelligence seeking to take over the human ability for its own ends. It's hard to reckon why this is going on, but a good way to understand that pineal function is tangible for somebody is just the art of dreaming and the fact that we do that. And we do then get into the ancient representations of the pineal gland and see that this has been well known for a long time. A lot of people won't realize that the Eye of Ra that so many of us are familiar with from Egyptian mythology is actually the hypothalamus area of the brain here and the pineal gland. Okay? This is your pineal gland. This is your hypothalamus, your pineal gland. This is the Eye of Ra. You have the different symbology with the winged creatures and so on. I won't get into that too much because there's so much more to draw from when we look at this. Okay? What do we have here? We have the Pope. He's got a pine cone here. We've got the cord of the pine cone. We have these beings here that, you know, look reptilian or bird-like, and this is in solid rock, holding a pineal gland. We do have a Caucasian figure with a beard here holding a pineal gland. Here we kind of have a representation of the pineal gland itself kind of doing its thing. This is obviously a pineal gland. Of course, the pineal gland is called such because it looks like a pine cone or a pineapple. We have it here in the brain, and of course, perception being such a large part of our reality, this is something that's known. A lot of people don't realize that if you were laying on your back or if you were simply looking up into the dome of the Capitol, of the U.S. Capitol, there's what's called the apotheosis of George Washington there, which literally depicts George Washington becoming a god. And this is what this is all about. You have the 13 steps of the pyramid here, and this is a representation of your pineal gland. And if we let them use fear with this on our money and in the system, we have to break that intention. Of course, that's a real brain. The pineal gland is a stargate and so on. And even Jesus himself said this, in that if your eye be single, then thy whole body will be full of light. And all the way back to Psalms, it says, you know, lift up ye heads, O ye glorious gates, to the everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, to the everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. I mean, it's such a, you know, the secrets are right here in front of us. And so what is this?
Time Warner.
This is Time Warner, who's largely involved in fiber optic communications, television, and so on. And they are essentially actively telling us, they're being very blatant and specific when they say that we're using fiber optic technology to interact with your pineal functioning. Okay? And that's what this is about. And we go on to the internet and how this all works, which of course is fiber optics is what allows the internet to work. It's a stated objective from DARPA and these other agencies that the sole conduit for basically all communication in the future is going to be fiber optics. This is the stated objective anyway, and it says, I saw as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire. Now in the different works that we have in the translation of the Bible, some of these will say that glows of fire, the sea of glass that glows of fire, and then it says that he saw them that had gotten victory over the name, the number, and the image of the beast, and over the mark and the number of his name. And they stand there with the harps of God. Now, the sea of glass that's mingled with fire, or glows of fire, is what you're looking at right here is a glass spun tube. Fiber optics, it all goes back to the WWW, the 666. The entire system is dependent upon this technology, and it is acknowledged in the Bible, in Revelation chapter 15, okay? And so this is something that is amazing to me and breathtaking and something of topic of debate. I have, you know, talked with people about this. I'll go ahead and say Steve Quayle. Initially, when I realized this and understanding the technology, I contacted him. He had his own set of ideas about this, and I believe that he's largely come to change his mind. I don't want to speak for Steve, but certainly he's somebody that I respect, having written 12 books and you know, really been a source of a lot of good information for people. And this has been a topic of debate. I have been in contact with some very high-level people about this, and the consensus is reaching the same thing. And to me personally, I don't feel like it's a matter of opinion. I think that it's a very clear reference to fiber optic technology in the context of which it was written with the WWW and so on, and the effect of this worshiping the image of the beast, which is the basis of this entire Montauk Project. So, that takes us into the Moldai stuff, which is very specific. I would like to make note of a friend of ours that we have worked with, Richard Zaragoza, was unable to attend due to his type of specific targeting that this outlines in descriptive detail. This is a phenomenon that we had discussed initially in an interview in a conference call that we recorded with him, he had done work with NASA and DARPA and others revolving around radio frequency. He was hesitant to share this stuff with us, but this is coded, obviously, but it's the office is interested in receiving proposals for innovative research. the development and demonstration of novel hybrid, biotic and abiotic nanoscale interface technologies that enable direct real-time conversion of biomolecular signals into electrical signals. Biological systems exhibit remarkable sensitivity, selectivity, and efficiency. Could be exploited in engineering systems should appropriate interfaces become available. Okay, that right there is the biggest human rights violation that we have ever heard of. It's an abomination in my opinion, and this has been going on with the integrated sensor network through the use of Morgellons and other types of things. And are there positive applications for this technology? Yes. Is it something that is still a human right if the human doesn't know? Absolutely it is. I am a proponent of making the public aware of these types of technologies. But when you have a defense threat, the rationale behind some of this has been, if you have a defense threat like bioweapons, chemical weapons, and so on, which we've seen with Ebola, which we've seen with the other stuff, they've come out and told us they have a cure for Ebola, didn't they? They sensed it right away when it came out, and you've got the president out there hugging and kissing somebody that had Ebola. What does that tell you? There's not going to be a re-Ebola because it's over. Okay? And so that's a pretty big deal. And this is a big deal when we're talking about the real-time conversion of bioelectrical signals or biological signals into digital signals, okay? And you can just kind of read that for yourself. This talks about, permeating the transmembrane of proteins, your DNA, cellular signal processing, all run through an artificial intelligence monitoring the levels of disease and other things in the human body in real time on a massive scale. This was done in conjunction with Microsoft and others. And this is an official DARPA solicitation in use. It's saved in an old Microsoft format, and these guys left it out here because they knew that this is something serious. And it's a blessing that this has leaked out into the public, and I'm happy to do that because this is the brunt of how this technology works. Biology to digital converter systems that enable direct real-time conversion of biological signals into digital information. Ongoing research in nanotechnology, starting to demonstrate controlled fabrication of high-quality nanostructures. This is it. This is the thing that they're doing with the micro dots, the quantum dots, the fibers, and all the other stuff that everybody has experienced. And they can do it in real time, and bioencoding is a genetic-specific technology to the point to where outfitted, whatever the source may be, whether it's a drone or the towers themselves, or even something in the home, your microwave or so on, it can target you. Now they do it through your devices. They do it through our cell phones. They do it through our tablets. They do Wi-Fi with this. It's genetic specific to the point to where there could be a crowd of 1 billion people out there, and they can hit one person and nobody else will feel it. You're talking about an array of different types of symptomology that can be essentially pushed onto somebody unknowingly, unwittingly, to torture them, to hurt them. Again, there are positive applications for this, but this type of technology in the wrong hands is something that is it's an abomination. It's such a violation of human rights. I mean, you're talking about stealing your cellular function. Okay? I mean, that's a big deal. And so this takes us into the next aspect, which is something that puzzles me, fascinates me. How is this really happening? Why has this been so compartmentalized? Just, oh my goodness. We have self-assembling holographic biosensors and biocomputers. This is from Sandia, one of the premier laboratories in the world, with limited release from 2006. It says, we present concepts for self-assembly of diffractive optics with potential uses in biosensors and biocomputers. The simplest such optics, diffraction gratings, can potentially be made from chemically stabilized microtubules migrating on micro-pattern tracks of motor protein kinesin. And we do see this reflected in the Morgellons epidemic without question. Okay, this is the root of these different fibers, the stuff that people, biomolecular interfaces and systems. Okay, how does this come out and how does this fit in? It's very fascinating. It takes us into the bio-nano interface. This is from Liebers. Liebers has been implicated in the other stuff from Berkeley that we had gone over earlier, and this is it. This is interfacing with your devices on a nano level with electromagnetic frequency for so many different things. The applications are really such a it's a virtual cornucopia of different application, and so we can judge for ourselves if this is good or bad. Now, we're going to be facing this in the years and months and you know, in the future period of how we're going to deal with this and allocate a set of different laws and stuff in which will, you know, regulate the use of this type of technology, because it's not going anywhere. It's self-replicating, and this is a big deal. This has been going on, and so this, you can see that this is from Sandia. Anybody can look this up and look into this themselves. Our tax dollars have literally helped pay for this. And this is a schematic here of a kinked nanowire. This is from Harvard. And nanowires with the core shell geometry can be tailored to have diverse electrical and optical properties. Shown here in a false color stem image of a modulation dubbed core shell nanowire, which has been designed to function as a standalone nanoscale solar cell. What does that tell us? That it collects solar energy. It enables us to move through the body. Based on that, in the body, come out of you. How many times have I heard these guys talk about, oh yeah, we've got fibers coming through our skin. What does this picture show us? This is going into a cell. Okay? So yeah, this stuff is real. We know that this is not a joke. This is not a game. And so this does give a strong sense of validity to the Morgellons epidemic, in which, of course, this is something that we can overcome with the use of resonant frequency also. And so we get into the neural dust. It's going to take us into how this whole thing has functioned. This is very important. I'm trying to wind this down for us. We've all had a long weekend, and this is obviously heavy subject matter, but the neural dust, an ultrasonic, low-power solution for chronic brain-machine interfaces. We have your skull, you have the blood-brain barrier, you get down into the cortex here, you see the placement of these into the brain below the blood-brain barrier, okay? We know that the nanoscale does this. And a major hurdle in brain-machine interface technology, or BMI, is the lack of an implantable neural interface system that remains viable for a substantial fraction of a primate lifetime. So they're putting this in the context of primates right now. Again, if you know your stuff in defense and intelligence, you know that this stuff is, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 years behind what's already been implemented for military applications. We can get into that at a later date, but, what more do you need? You have the Department of Defense official website here, okay, Department of Defense. This is an HTML link that anybody can look up for themselves. Armed with Science, the official U.S. Defense Department science blog. Armed with Science, okay? What does it say? It says remote control of brain activity using ultrasound. Is this something that we want out there? What have we been talking about the whole time? This is the real deal. This is from September of 2010. And every single aspect of human sensation, perception, emotion, and behavior is regulated by brain activity. Thus, having the ability to stimulate brain function is a powerful technology. I would say so, and to the point that you can control basically the whole planet with it, with a small system running off artificial intelligence, and God forbid you be the person putting the parameters in there. It's going to try to take you over, or whatever is going on here. It's certainly something that needs to be addressed, and again, it's very interesting that we do see the Bilderberg group meeting right now about artificial intelligence. I'm here to tell you that that is because they have figured out that it has been in control. This is a very interesting chronology in and of itself. This is the day before Kim's birthday back in 2013, in which the system, if we'll remember, the 666 system from Berkeley was propagated out of a place called Corey Hall. Okay? This happens to be Corey Hall. Okay? This is the day before the government shutdown. This was actually published on October 1st, 2013. That was the first day of the government shutdown in 2013. Hours before the government shut down. Literally hours. We had a human chipping agenda implanted into this Obamacare, excuse the pun, and we shut down the whole thing because the House and the Congress wouldn't push it through. The House didn't want to do it. Senate and the House didn't want to do it. Senate and Congress, rather. And hours before the government shut down, the Satanic System propagation site blows up. The entire campus of Berkeley is evacuated. Major big deal. Okay? What happens next? Hours later, the government shuts down. Literally. Literally, the government shuts down hours later. We saw the 666 system, it comes out of there, it's gone. Now the government shuts down. What's next? 1 week later, the NSA data center melts down and it delayed the opening more than a year, according to reports. Okay? This is the system out in Berkeley. That chronology in and of itself, this here dated October 8th of 2013. Literally, we have a week span of the system, okay, going up in flames.
Standing on it.
Okay? It's beautiful. Okay, this is the NSA spying system that was spying on our brains. Then this thing melts down. Okay? Wow. And so I guess that's the end of where we'll be right now. I guess that's all we got there. I would just like to say that there's much more to come for this. We put this together, Bobby Vaughn and I, last night. I really owe this presentation to his help of helping me land this out. With everybody's help here has been amazing. But I'm not opposed to taking any comments. Does anybody have any questions or anything that I can help answer while we're still rolling here? Does that make sense to you guys? Does this mean anything to you? I mean, how do you feel about what you've just witnessed here?
I think the most important thing for all of us is to know that we know where we're going, and that is we have victory over this system.
Absolutely. Solutions oriented.
Yes.
What do you think, Andy?
I think the most important part to remember is that the way we will dismantle this system is through our human intention, through the purity of our hearts, through the notion of knowing and doing the right thing, that we feel in our hearts that something is very wrong on our planet. Everybody knows something is very wrong. Nobody can pinpoint it. Nobody can figure out exactly what they're sensing and what they're feeling, because there's a very unnatural force trying to take over the world and everything on it, including us. So I think it's imperative to remember that the way all of this is going to happen is through the human collective consciousness, raising the vibration of that consciousness, and by living life in the purest way and doing the right thing, basically. So again, we go back to human intention, which has the power to do anything we choose to use it for, good or bad.
Absolutely. You know, being born into secret projects, my dad spoke 5 languages and all this kind of stuff. The one word that wasn't in his vocabulary was can't. It's one of the things they instilled in me. Can you tell us a little bit? Do you care if I put you on camera real quick? Do you not want to? Huh? You don't care? I just want to ask you about when you, during the first part of the presentation, if you remember what happened, if you just want to kind of tell us what that looked like and what it meant to you and how that happened, because it's something that really concerned me and it scared me. I'll be honest with you, it scared me. And so what was that for you?
Yeah, excuse me. You'd put a picture of a spacecraft that I've actually seen in person, and it's the oh man, I've been through some shit, but that's the scariest shit I've ever been through in my life. You know what I'm saying? And it just obviously triggered a memory and went into a seizure, they say.
Can you tell us about the clearings and how it's helped you?
Life-changing. I'm here. If it wasn't for the clearance, I wouldn't be here.
I mean, from somebody who had basically been bedridden, right?
Yeah,
I
literally.
mean, we've talked to this is the change that you've had in the last, 2 days has been amazing. And so I guess we'll cut it there. I just wanted to touch on that, guys. I appreciate all you guys being here.